Hi there everyone, and welcome to the first art video of this series. Today it will be less about the art for the game, but some basic history on pixel art, some good palette and color theory, and one of the most asked questions in basically any art form ever. How do I find my style? So, to get started, I'll discuss what pixel art is and where it came from. Pixel art is the art form that came from early games because machines weren't advanced enough to handle large sprites. This art style's popularity has risen and fallen over about the last 40-ish years, and I'll be talking about the key points of the pixel art timeline, as well as information we can gather about how we make pixel art look good. Most games to begin with were in arcades, due to game consoles not having enough storage space to hold the data for video games. Games such as Space Invaders in 1978, Asteroids in 1979, and Pac-Man in 1980 were good examples of these. The game sprites used to make these games were usually all one flat color, but the developers still managed to make it understandable, be it aliens or cartoonish ghosts. This is the first key skill in pixel art. The readability of pixel art is how easy it is to decipher what something's meant to be. Let's use an example, let's say an elephant. First, we must pick out the key parts of an elephant, which, well, make it look like an elephant. This would be things such as the big ears, long trunk, tusks, etc. You wouldn't really want to pick out something such as the number of wrinkles on the elephant, or the exact eye shape, as it's not the most unique thing about it. If you now take the key bits of information needed for something to look like an elephant, and bring it over to pixel art, you can already tell what it is, even if I don't put it in the same pose, or if I change its color. Even though we didn't include all of the detail, it's still readable, and that's what readability is all about. The next important era in pixel art is known as the 8-bit era. In 1989, Sega released the first console ever to be able to run 8-bit art. This was called the 8-bit Master System. This console led to a massive wave of 8-bit games like Sonic the Hedgehog and Mega Man. 8-bit art means that they could use a number of colors that could be stored in 8 binary digits, or 8 bits. You can represent 256 different colors in 8 bits, from 00000000 to 11111111, and the 8-bit Master System was able to show up to 16 of these colors on the screen at the same time. It might seem quite trivial now, however, this was revolutionary in the world of pixel art at the time, as sprites got much larger and more complex. It was easier to make sprites with multiple colors in them, and here we get the second important thing about pixel art. You might think that color is quite simple, because a lot of people think it doesn't require much thought to place hues onto an image. However, because of the sheer amount of ways you can represent your art using colors, you really do need a good understanding of the theory behind it. Another reason we use color palettes is not just because it's limiting, but also because it makes your art look clearer and it has a more defined and consistent atmosphere throughout. There'll be links to 2 very good websites to find other people's palettes below. These websites are called Lowspec and Adobe Color. Here's some useful ways you can use color palettes, either ones you've made or ones that you've taken off the internet, to make your art look consistent, and also to make it clear what you want the audience to feel when they look upon your art, either in-game or just as a separate piece. Monochromatic is just shifting the brightness up and down while keeping the hue and saturation the same. This basically means you'll get shades, which are the darker versions of the original color, and tints, which are lighter versions of the original color, as one color palette. Using a monochromatic color palette has the advantage of making your art blend really well, and it almost looks like there's an overlay placed over it, which is quite a nice way of achieving a unique effect. Another positive is that you can make certain things stand out much more just by using a different color. But a reason I wouldn't choose this style is because it has the downside of maybe making your game look a bit bland. Analogous palettes are also called harmonious palettes, as it uses harmonious colors. Harmonious colors are colors next to each other in the color wheel. Benefits to this style are, again, cohesiveness, but also defining your art within a game with 2 or 3 similar colors means that the atmosphere is very consistent. Complementary palettes use colors that are on opposite sides of the color wheel. The colors work together as they accent each other and make the art bold or eye-catching. Using colors from opposite sides of the color wheel has a very nice effect, and they contrast heavily with each other. Therefore, many characters have complementary color schemes as it makes them stand out. Think Yoshi with red and green, or Thanos with purple and yellow. The main way that these color palettes are used is they have a base color and another accent color, so one color is used more than the other. A triadic color palette takes colors in any thirds of the color wheel, giving you more main colors to work with. Mario is red and blue, but has yellow buttons as accents. This has the benefits of complementary colors, as well as slightly more freedom in color choice. However, it can be overdone, leaving your art to look slightly messy or less readable. The very last thing I wanted to mention about colors were something called color meanings. The meaning of colors emotionally also plays a role in what color you choose. Red shows anger, aggression, and danger, but also love and passion. Orange is exotic, youthful, warm, and happy. Yellow is energetic, childlike, positive, and optimistic, but sometimes also sour or spoiled. Green is healthy, soothing, natural, and eco-friendly, but it can also show envy or disgust. Blue is wisdom, calmness, trust, and respect, but can also be used for sadness and coldness. Pink also shows love like red, but also means tender, caring, and connotes creativity. Purple is royal and mysterious, luxurious, and magical. White shows purity, innocence, and simplicity. And finally, black is death, darkness, regret, fear, and basically just all the evil, scary stuff. Even if you're picking other people's palettes from the websites that I had, or other pieces of art, you can try and pick a mood using certain colors based on color meanings. If you want a cartoonish look, go with a slightly more vibrant color palette. And if you want calming, go for pastel colors. Colors can also tell you what your game's characters had access to, or what the world is like. Use more browns, greys, and natural colors, like greens or warm colors, if you want to draw in a medieval European style. You wouldn't find bright whites and clean blues in this style, because they just simply didn't have access to those at the time. You can also look up image references found online to give you some inspiration on the type of colors that you could use. Okay, going back to eras in video games. After 8-bit, things got more advanced and eventually rose to 16-bit. Again, sprites got even more advanced, could show even more color, and got way more complicated. Zelda: A Link to the Past is an early example of this 16-bit style. Super Metroid, which came a bit later, was released in 1997, with impressive graphics and detail. The amount of colours they could handle finally enabled them to create convincing shadows and highlights. But this era shows us the importance of our next key tip. Scaling is everything in your game world having a consistent size. This doesn't just refer to sprites relative to each other, but also the size of a singular pixel. There are so many game designers who have games which just end up with inconsistent resolutions, when a pixel used for the UI is slightly bigger than a pixel used for the general game world, or when items in the world have a higher resolution than the rest of the game. It just doesn't fit very well. This is why you must always make your pixel art consistent, otherwise it comes out a bit messy. The other type of scaling I mentioned previously was scaling relative to other sprites. A weapon you pick up can't be 10 times as big as the player unless it makes sense in the game world, and enemies should probably be scaled depending on how you want to make the player feel about them. Small enemies will make the player feel powerful, crushing tiny bugs and gaining loot. However, big enemies will make the player feel intimidated, and it gives them an idea of how powerful these opponents are. The final tip I have for you when making pixel art is sometimes you have to break these rules. Pixel art is still art, it's still creative, and you can't really put boundaries all the time, otherwise you'll miss some fun or interesting opportunities. Maybe you want enemies to be tiny, then completely contrast it to surprise the player when they find out it's super powerful. Maybe you want a sprite with low readability, which gives it mystery. The choice is basically up to you. It's still art, as I said before. So, the question that you've been wanting me to answer. How do I create my style? Firstly, you don't really create your style. It's something that's just going to be everywhere in your art, and you just don't notice. Because your style seems so natural to you, you'll end up not noticing your style because you've just been doing it all along, and you've been trying to find a way to make your art look good or appealing to other people. I think what you really have to focus on is how do you improve your style rather than find your style. For example, you might draw pixel art with an outline, you might draw it without an outline. And that's already part of your style. You might do quite detailed shading, or you might do quite plain shading. That's also part of your style. Everything you do in art is always going to be yours because it's your art. So you can basically just stop going onto the internet and searching how do I find my style, because you don't need to. For example, for me, this sounds really dumb, but I didn't actually realize that I didn't do outlines on pixel art until a friend noticed and was like, oh, this is kind of weird, you don't really put outlines on your pixel art. And it just sort of felt natural to me, and I saw everyone else doing pixel art. Most of them had outlines, and I just assumed I was doing the same thing. But that's sort of become my style now. I've not really enjoyed putting outlines on stuff, and once I noticed that, my art started improving much more because I started looking at more people who didn't put outlines on their art and taking things from their styles and putting them into my own style. So I think you really have to get other people to look at your art to improve, because then you'll know what your style is. Anyway, if you actually want a way to improve your style, I'd say you have to go and look at other pixel art that you really enjoy and just adapt it into your own style. So try out a bunch of other people's and try and imitate them. When I say imitate, I don't mean copy pixel by pixel, because that is just straight up copying art, and you shouldn't do that. When I say imitating, I mean taking parts of their style, their color palette, their shapes that they use, or just anything in general that you like about it, and try and adapt it. Draw different characters, maybe some of your original characters that you've created, but try and replicate it in their style. And after a while, you'll start changing things more and more, and you'll realize that you've found your own style. I'm going to give you a drawing challenge which might help you find your own style. Whenever you have the opportunity to, take a character, maybe an OC you created, or one that you found from the media, like from a TV show, and try and draw it. Once you've done this one style, try and draw the character in a few different other styles. Maybe search up pixel art games on the internet and look for ones that look appealing to you, and try and imitate their styles. Take into account readability or key features which every single drawing must have to make it look like that character. Color, a color palette which matches the style but stays roughly consistent. And scaling. Try and keep the proportions similar in size, unless a resolution is much bigger or smaller, or if a body feature is exaggerated, for example, the head being bigger in a certain style. This is my attempt at the 5 to 10 different art styles challenge. See how many you can come up with, and make sure to send them on our Discord server. Speaking of our Discord server, there's a link below where you can join and discuss about game dev, art, and more, and send in your style drawings. I hope you learned something from this video. Next time we'll be covering character design. Good luck in your art, and I'll see you next time.